Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. This is your captain, Randy Wright speaking, and as always, I'm joined on our state-of-the-art radio program by my first officer, Jeremy Grapendon. Folks, this will be the final boarding call, so if you please, claim your seats, fasten your seatbelts, kick back, relax, and enjoy the show, while Jeremy and I go ahead and delve into the pre-flight checklist, as there really is a lot of news and information to get to before we may fully indulge you with your in-flight entertainment. Well, folks, we've spent a lot of time discussing the 2016 presidential election cycle, and I think that partly what we need to do now is take a step back and examine how we've gotten to where we are today, what it is that has led us to depart from conventional wisdom, to discard it. Because as you are all aware, the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media have done their damnedest to try and take away from our conventional wisdom. But more so than just that, they're trying to pick our candidate for us. And that is simply something that is intolerable. We cannot accept that because it would be the unraveling of our nation. And I think of all the things that we could hit upon with respect to this, it would have to be on the lines of education, because our education system, going all the way back to Thomas Dewey at the turn of the 20th century, has been infiltrated by the Fabian socialists. And this goes back to one of the great visionaries of the 20th century and the warnings that he gave to the United States and her people. And that was that the Fabian socialists will want to take over education, because by taking over education, they are the ones that are able to take control of the future or destiny of the nation. Think of George Orwell's 1984. What was one of the main things they wanted to do? To control thought. Well, the best way to control thought is to start at the early development of the future generations. And if you control the future generations of a country, then you can basically control how that country will progress in the future, what it will do, what its destiny will be.
There's actually an attachment to that as well. With being able to control the future generations, you are able to erase the past. And this goes right in hand with that saying, those who fail to adhere to or pay attention to history are condemned or doomed to repeat it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they don't want to repeat the history. They want to make their own history.
Mm-hmm. So
if you control the future generations, you eliminate the previous history, therefore it goes by the wayside, so you don't make the mistake, so to speak, of repeating it on the surface. A prime example of this would be what we've seen with the revisionist history movement. And I always use this example regarding this because it is the most apropos, it is the most poignant example that I can think of. And it regards Abraham Lincoln. Now, folks, we've done shows before about Lincoln the Tyrant, just how unconstitutional he was or how he behaved, so on and so forth. And I've gotten into debates with several people about, Lincoln's actions. Well, he did it for the betterment of the country as a whole, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I don't care. He violated the Constitution. But the example I use, and it makes a striking point, is I will ask the younger generations, my generation, mine and Randy's generation, even the generation before me, the decade before me from the 70s, and I'll ask them this very simple question. Who freed the slaves? Who abolished slavery? And every single answer that I've gotten, every single time, was Abraham Lincoln. And then when I tell them, no, that's incorrect, they say, well, no, Abraham Lincoln abolished slavery. He freed the slave. No, he didn't. So the simple fact is history shows us, documented history shows us, not the history that the public schools, which are under the thumb and the extension of this indoctrination utopia called our federal government that is deeply rooted in Fabianism is the fact that slavery was abolished with the 13th Amendment of the Constitution, which was ratified on December 15th, 1865. Now, if memory serves, Abraham Lincoln was assassinated in April 15th, 1865, I believe is the correct date.
Yes.
So unless Abraham Lincoln somehow, some way came back to life 8 months later and gave a resounding speech to prison, and then they say, oh no, he did that with the Emancipation Proclamation. And again, they take something with history, two different points in history, and they meld them together in order to create their own version of history.
Mm.
This is a problem. It's happened with that instance. It's happened with the reasons why we got involved in World War II, the reasons why we got involved in World War I. In fact, every reason why we got involved in any military theater and operation in our country's history, they've revised it and taken 1, 2, 3, or several points in history and melded them together to try and make this so-called factual history. And it's absolutely absurd.
Well, let's take it a step further back, Jeremy. Let's take it a step further back because, you know, I went to St. Edward's University a little over 12 years ago is when I started. And I was a history major. And one of the major areas where they were trying to revise the history was with respect to the foundation of this country. I literally had a history professor stand before the class and say that George Washington was basically illiterate. Of course, nothing could be further from the truth, because if you recall, the French and Indian War, or the 7 Years' War as it was known in Europe, the dispatches that we had from that, the accounts that we had from that came from the pen of Washington. They were beautifully written. They were published even in the colonies, and they were the second most read thing, seconded only by the Bible. The Bible is the only thing that people read more of than Washington's accounts of that conflict. So it shows that the historical revisionists are engaged in outright lies. They are duplicitous about what they try and say. It even goes down to this whole notion of attacking the natural law foundations of the Constitution. Because again, if you look at what the concerted effort of the Fabian socialists has always been, it's been to tear down the edifice of what was there before, to take down the structure so that they could then replace it with this dystopia that they've created. And the only way they can do that is to destroy what came before. And that's why they start off by attacking the pillars of society, of what started society, of how it all got going.
Sure. And then, of course, all of that leads into, the tentacles, which we spoke of from our earlier show tonight,
Mm-hmm.
that being political correctness. Of course, we just mentioned revisionist history. And then you have indoctrination, which goes hand in hand with the revisionism, because now you are brainwashing our youth, our posterity, our future generations into believing something that is absolutely false. But of course, that also, it's kind of like a stair step. It's a 4-tiered process where you start with the political correctness. You tell them, no, you can't say that. So you get them to start to bend to your will, and then you indoctrinate them by feeding them false information. And then once they start to believe it, you've successfully completed the brainwashing aspect of it. And then that is the final step before moral relativism. And all of those things, and then when they start to branch out, that allows them to have their feelers or their tentacles to go out into things such as Christianity, invasive measures into the home, trying to uproot and destroy the nuclear family, taking disciplinary powers away from the parents and putting them in charge of the state, where it's the state decides what's best for the children rather than the parents.
Mm-hmm.
You have all these different factors, and it's just like this web that shoots out and is tainted with a vile poison that becomes some irremovable rash that you'll never be able to get rid of. And then along comes individuals like us who attack this with our sharpened swords of knowledge pertaining to history, the Constitution, family core values and principles, all rooted in natural law, and they want to silence us because they can't get past us. So they do everything to discredit us. And that's all, again, part of the propaganda. If you cannot get your agenda pushed through, you have to utilize your enemies' words against them and attack them. You have to make them look like they're the ones who are doing the propaganda rather than yourself. And that's what's known as projection, which we've seen in the Trump campaign. We see it all the time within the Democrats. We see it not only from Trump, but we've also seen it from Kasich and various other different candidates. So, and we see it at every level, local, state, local, county, state, and federal levels, with people doing this. Why? Because they do not want their agenda to be found out. They do not want it to be taken away from them, because without that, that is what they utilize to have as their existence. They wake up every morning thinking of ways to maintain that existence, but more so ways of defending it and attacking those that would, do damage to it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's become a problem, a social problem. And again, we have to point back to Zygmunt Dobbs and Archibald Roosevelt and their warnings about this, and the failure of our society, our republic, and our future generations of not adhering to those warnings or heeding them.
And it comes down to the one of the warnings that he spoke of, which was primarily that the Fabians are banking on this idea that the average American citizen, the true ultimate wielder of sovereignty, is going to be so wrapped up in their day-to-day lives that they're not going to have the political time and energy or capital to invest in keeping up with things. And that's why they couch things in vague language. That's why you get the two-faced type of people like Mike Huckabee, who's coming out and spewing a bunch of fake things about Cruz, saying that he's a fake Christian and whatnot. You see, this type of degeneracy can be linked into also how we're not teaching the up-and-coming generations the rules of decorum. We're not teaching them how to be civil individuals. And there's nothing wrong with a code of civility. I know I've heard some around here, some of my friends say, well, the code of civility, that's a form of political correctness. No, it's not. It is a type of human decency. You have to be able to have civil discourse. You have to be able to have honorable discussions without trying to tear somebody's throats out, because if you aren't able to do that, then it's just going to degenerate and devolve into violence each and every time. And if you allow that to happen within a nation, it means that our Republican form vanishes and gets replaced with a foreign, almost feudalistic style system, which would be incompatible with what we have. It would go against the grain and fiber of what it means to be an American citizen. And again, that's due in no small part to the failures of our education system to teach people what our values and principles are, what we are as a nation. Take, for instance, the loose use of the term democracy. That's been abused since the 19th century. But the United States of America is not, nor has it ever been, a direct democracy. Nor should it ever be one, because it doesn't recognize the sovereign rights of the popular individual, the popular sovereign. And that, that you need to have that understanding to have a fluent and working knowledge of how our system works and how to be a proactive and productive member of society.
Sure. In simpler terms, basically, political correctness is, drilled its taproot into our society to where now having manners and politeness has become taboo. It's completely backwards. You cannot, and Randy, you and I talked about this the other night, where I work, we have a rule, no hats are allowed in the building. And I'm always telling individuals, remove your hat, remove your hat. And we have this talk about decorum and politeness and manners to where a gentleman, and that word is not even used anymore in proper context due to the indoctrination of our youth. But gentlemen, true gentlemen in the true sense of the word, if there's a female present, you remove your hat. If you are inside a building and you are not exiting that building, or you have not just entered into the building, or you are not in an area where it's considered to be the lobby, you do not wear your hat. And if you are in the lobby, or even exiting the building, or coming into the building, if there's a woman present, you remove your hat. It is a sign of gratitude and respect towards the women. And we can look at that and put it on the larger scale now of what it is. Look at this political correct nonsense, this false war on the war on women. Look at the way Donald Trump has talked about women, the remarks that he's made. He has no respect for women. In fact, just earlier, Randy, we came across this information regarding TrumpEscorts.com. So, which would make his grandpappy proud because his grandfather dabbled in the brothel business, so on and so forth, as we touched on previous episodes. But the decorum is not there. And if you cannot respect, it's not about respecting other people's intuitions about, I'm supporting Trump and there's nothing you can say about that. It's not about respecting that. It's about respecting the ideology and the principle behind that. If people want to vote for Trump, I can respect that because they're doing one thing. The only thing I can respect about that is they're exercising their right to vote. I don't agree with it, but I respect their decision to vote.
Right.
Not for whom they're voting for, but because they are voting, period. And if we no longer do that as a society, we do not have that stability, you might as well consider us to be damned. Damned for all eternity, because without that sense of decorum and civility, that initial courtesy, common courtesy of respect, and common courtesy has gone the way of common sense. If common sense was common, everyone would have it. Likewise, if common courtesy was common, everyone would have it. It's a sign of instantaneous respect. That's all it is. And that is lacking. Now you hear, you can't walk anywhere, you're out in public, you hear children, young adolescents, the vulgarity that comes out of their mouths, the so-called colorful vocabulary that they have, when they're using the N-word towards each other, they're using it as a term of endearment. Or, it's just, I can't stand it. It's absolutely nonsensical. And that's not civilization. That is not a civilized way to behave.
No.
And the parents condone it. That's even worse. The parents condone it. So they're perpetuating this disease.
And there's a type of intellectual laxity that's happened. There's a type of disinterestedness on the part of some parents. And I'm not going to lay this to blame on all parents, but this type of complacency that we see running rampant throughout society is a true danger, because it's showing that any type of formal structure within the country is starting to die off. For instance, in the courthouses and courtrooms, I've noticed that since I've been practicing, You can now tell who the attorneys are because no one else comes dressed up. They come in T-shirts or polo shirts, but they never are in suit and tie. They're never in blouse and dress. They're never dressed up. Why? It's not comfortable. Everything has become about personal gratification, instant gratification, and it always has to be instantaneous. And so when you get into that me type mentality, you begin to forget that there are institutions that need to be honored to help keep society going, that there is a sense of something greater than what we have now, that our nation is greater than the sum of its parts. And the reason that we lose a lot of that abstract logic and reasoning is that we're not taught critical thinking, at least in its traditional or classical sense. And as we depart from that, we see that the nation itself moves towards entropy, that we move towards decay. And that decay is really threatening every facet of our daily lives. And if we don't move to address it soon, entropy will lead to collapse.
And even what's more so and even worse than that is that entropy is being embraced. It's being welcomed with open arms. Is it to give? It would be no different than, you know, a person being exposed to anthrax and saying, "Oh my gosh, finally I can have a bath in anthrax. I can roll around in it and everything's hunky dory." That's coming to it's madness.
Yeah,
it's absolute madness. I mean, if people are so willing to embrace this, where did that disconnect come in? Where did it disconnect from civil discourse, manners, politeness, to let's embrace the spawn of Satan because he's going to make us feel good? Where did that happen? And I firmly believe that part of where that happened is within the education system as a whole. Public education system altogether. You know, I'm going to say some things that may upset some individuals that are teachers in the public school system. And this isn't directed at those of you who are understanding of what we're talking about. I'm going to talk about those individuals who went through the motions to get the sheepskin to hang on the wall, that have no care in the world about anybody's education, but they only went through this because, hey, if I get a diploma that says that I can teach people, that means I can have a job. So that means I can sustain my existence of a lifestyle, and I don't really care about what I'm saying. Those so-called professionals are the equivalent of what the Bible refers to as false prophets. Mm. Okay? And here's the other thing. You're lazy, stupid. I'm not even going to call you ignorant because ignorance can be fixed. And I'm even, you know, I'm reluctant to use the word stupid because it would be an insult to stupid people. You are a waste of skin and space and air that I can be breathing. You are destroying this country. You are destroying the very fabric of what we as sovereigns have an obligation to, and that is to ensure the existence of our republic, our sovereign nation, for our future generations. If you're so willing to destroy our future generations by twisting their mind and molding them into something that is absolutely opposite, polar opposite of what our country stands for, then you are part of the problem. I can't fault those children. I can't fault those people that you are educating.
And it comes from an organized movement. Let's take a trip back in time. Let's go back to the 1960s. We've all heard of the term the countercultural revolution, or the counterculture. Most of these teachers were at least raised in a type of mentality that came from that time. In law, even, there's a type of legal philosophy or jurisprudential school that existed at that time known as critical legal studies. Now, I know that I've mentioned this on past episodes, but it bears repeating here since we're talking about the decay of America's education and the American education system. Well, critical legal theory was basically a type of philosophy, an approach to teaching the law that was based in Marxism and cynicism. And it came into fruition in the 60s, led by the Flower Power children, the age of Aquarius. It was all about me, tear down this system because the system isn't fair. We've got to get back at this, and we got to take the power back, man. Except they became everything that they were preaching to be against and worse. They doubled down on these efforts to centralize the government, but their idea is the idea that we hear from Fabian socialists time and again. It's a mantra that's repeated ad nauseum throughout history. Well, the only reason it didn't work is because the right people didn't try it. But of course, repeating the same thing over and over again in the hopes of, achieving a different outcome is tantamount to insanity. It is tantamount to insanity. And it's going through all levels of education. And it started with that cultural shift in the 1960s. That's when any type of formalism started to decay. That's when you saw people rising up against all of our institutions and traditions. And now it's as though the pendulum has gone so far in the opposite direction that it needs a swift corrective recourse.
Sure. And, we can talk about that. We can talk about another movement that has had a direct impact on specifically the family unit. And that movement is feminism. Now, Randy, you and I have an acquaintance that has always astounded that, that's not true feminism. That's not what it was all about. That's a bastardized version of it. The thing is, when you take a movement and then you have an offshoot of it, you still have remnants of that initial movement. Okay? And when we had things come to fruition and laws passed like the Lilly Ledbetter Act that was signed or introduced by drunken Teddy Kennedy, Mr. Chappaquiddick himself.
The swimmer.
The swimmer. The New England Olympian swimmer, Teddy Kennedy, and it's signed into law by Adolf Obama. Well, what they did was it added more teeth to that movement. It actually reinvigorated that movement because now there are women out there, and I know people are going to say, you guys are sexist. Guess what? Again, political correctness has no seat at this table because it is a natural fact that women are not designed for certain things that men are, and vice versa. Men are not designed for certain things that women are, like childbirth. Okay? Women are not designed emotionally and mentally to serve in the military. Why? Because it is a hellish task to take. Now, are there women that are capable of doing it? Yes. And you know what? I applaud them. Absolutely applaud them. But when you have movements like feminism work their way into with their tampon strings and charred bra straps into the military that says, well, we should have to do the same calisthenics and the same requirements in order to, belong to a certain military unit as those men because we're women. Or in more recent times, lawsuits that were filed in, I believe it was New Jersey, pertaining to women being on the fire department, not having to do a deadlift and pull of 250 pounds, which would simulate pulling a lifeless human body out of a burning building.
Well, it always comes down to do as I say, not as I do. They always cut out this niche. And this is going to move into the second segment of the show. And we're going to cover something again here that we covered on the show, or, tonight's earlier show. And I want to go back to the Harvard Law incident where they removed the seal. and they practiced all of this political correctness. And I'm going to tie this into one of the other disputes that occurred during what I am now labeling the summer of political correctness. That was the summer of 2015. You notice that all these students want these so-called safe zones. They want to be protected from free speech. They want to be protected from true ideology. They want to be protected from a marketplace of ideals. So essentially, what they're attempting to do now is to transform the marketplace of ideas, where you can disagree, have civil discourse, you can debate things and still be civil, to the battlefield of political correctness. The battlefield of political correctness is designed to be like biological warfare. It's designed to take logic and common sense and throw it out the window. It's designed to pit American citizen against American citizen, or indeed any citizen of where it comes into place, and to deprive them of their identity. It's essentially trying to create a type of educational genocide, a type of academic genocide, to wipe out a system of thought. And that is what's so disingenuous about it, because they engage in semantics, they engage in twisting words, and they engage in creating this narrative that nobody was talking about before. Take, for instance, the North Carolina bathroom incident that has just sent everybody over the edge. There's now, 50,000 signatures or more for boycotting Target for the way they've handled this issue? Or is it 600,000?
600,000. Yeah.
600,000. That's amazing. That's over 500,000. And it shows that there are fringes in this radical army of political correctness marching on this battlefield of political correctness that are doing everything in their power to tear this country apart. And we can no longer just go by a detente mindset, remembering that detente means live or let live. These people are not going to leave us alone. They're not going to back off. And we're going to have to fight. We're going to have to stand our ground and repeat a phrase, a two-letter phrase of the English language that's almost universally understood. No. Stop it. No.
Well, this goes again, ties right in with the instant gratification aspect of this new social norm, or even moray of society. And again, there is yet another attachment to this. It's the mentality of feeling entitled. All of these individuals, you have these individuals of the gay and homosexual community, the queer community, and yes, I'm going to refer to them as the queer community, okay, the homosexual community. I'm not going to call you by your proper name that you label for yourself, because I don't fall in line with your propagandist crap, okay? You're homosexuals, period, okay? You are anti-procreation. If you say otherwise, no, you're anti-procreation, period. You are absolutely counterintuitive to natural law. But you feel just because you are alive, you are entitled to rights, certain rights. Well, yes, you are. They are enumerated in our shared Constitution. And by the way, all of you gays and lesbians and queers out there, if anybody was to try and trample or infringe upon your constitutional rights, Randy and I will be one of the first ones to step up and say, no, that's not going to happen. However, when you want to say that you have extra constitutional rights, meaning rights that are not enumerated and endowed to you by our Creator, guess what? You're on your own with that one, chapstick, because it doesn't matter. You do not have what rights you think you have or say you have.
But Jeremy, it always starts off in an intellectually disingenuous way. It always starts off of, well, all we're doing is equality. All we're doing is trying to make everyone fit in. It's diversity. What they're actually preaching is the direct opposite of what their message is in practice. And
Stating tenets.
yes, and this goes all the way back to the game of semantics that we warned about in our first episode, which aired on September 11th of 2015. You have to watch and read between the lines because they are deceptive in their use of words. They're not using the words as they were originally intended to be defined. And what this comes down to is it shows that they are duplicitous. It shows that they are trying to wield a double-edged sword here and that they're trying to control the narrative of the nation. And why is it important to control the narrative of the nation? Because if you control the narrative of the nation, you will then dictate the direction of which that nation will travel, and you will control the future. You see, it's always about power. It's always about power and control. Those are the two ultimate factors that have been fought over since this nation was devised over 230 years ago. And there's no way around that.
And when you speak about them using those certain words in that narrative outside the proper context, well, that's the result that we see from the indoctrination of our youth. It is the absolute direct result of that, because they are told in school, and I remember it wasn't that long ago. In fact, it was about a year ago. It was my final semester for my bachelor's degree, and in the class, the class is called social problems. Okay, right off the bat, boom, red flags go up all over the place at me. So I looked at this as an opportunity to educate people. And one of our first assignments, or first class discussions, was we had to come up with a problem or something that was perceived to be a social problem. Of course, me being the declarant of war on political correctness, I raised my hand. And folks, I'll give you three guesses as to what my social problem was that I gave as an example, and the first two don't count. And I'll tell you what it is. Political correctness. And my professor says, well, I don't understand that. Can you elaborate on it? Sure. And the example I gave was the cartoon, The Flintstones, the theme song from The Flintstones. It says, we'll have a gay old time. Now, it is not politically correct to use the word gay because it's offensive to people. But yet, back in the 50s, gay meant happy. Now, if they want something, they want to bring back this. There's all this talk about, retro reinvigoration. We need to bring back this. Let's bring back this. We have different times. We're going to bring this back. Everything's retro, whether it's fashion, video games, whatever the case is. I said we bring back the word gay. And I said we bring it back in the proper context in which it was meant to be used, meaning happy. Now, I'm very gay that I have the opportunity to do this show. It makes me happy.
It's a gay old time.
See, it's a gay old time. Now, not only was my professor visibly upset about this, and I could tell I'm a pretty good judge of character reading people like a book. Their body language it's one of my hobbies. Studying people's body language. Yeah. I utilize it in my career and so on and so forth. But not only was my professor obviously physically distraught and upset about this, but there was also classmates of mine who were upset about this.
Well, it's because they live in this web of political correctness. They live in this era. I'm going to make a comparison here. If you look back at history, look at the Victorian age. They were so uptight about having any reference to sexual innuendos, any type of reference to sex or bodily functions, that they would have special tablecloths that would cover the legs of the table because it was thought that someone might get the wrong impression, might get sexually aroused from a table leg. All right, for that generation, sex was the taboo. For our generation, we've made offensiveness become the new type of taboo. It's to the point now that you have games like Cards Against Humanity that are designed to be vulgar and offensive because we have become so cocooned, because we have become so repressed in our ability to freely express ourselves. You see, folks, what we have done to ourselves is we have cornered ourselves. We have forced ourselves into a cage that's not only unnatural, it's dangerous. It goes against everything that our representative Republican form of government stands for and represents. And it's dangerous because it's actually unraveling the societal fabric. And you can see this. Part of the reason why we have so much anger right now that has been dominating throughout this 2016 presidential election cycle is that people realize this cancerous doctrine of political correctness is like a noose. It's strangling us.
Well, and this goes right back to the point that I made on our show earlier tonight with what Khrushchev said. To destroy the political system or to demoralize and break down the inner workings of the United States and their republic, you only need three things: alcohol, pornography, and drugs. Now, in today's society, it has come full circle and complete fruition to where back in the 20s and 30s, back during that time when sex was considered to be taboo, and they cover the table lengths, now you have individuals going into gay bars where they even talk about, I'm assuming, flipping the tables upside down or the bar stools and saying, hey, wouldn't it be fun to try this out? Really? Is that the degradation and dementedness that our society has become, to where that is how people in our society think? It's Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed because of sexually deviant acts of homosexuals engaging in that kind of, disgusting behavior.
But Jeremy, it's interesting. You mentioned Sodom and Gomorrah. And it brings in yet another aspect of this: the attack of religion. And we've seen people who normally were defensive of it all of a sudden attack it when they drank the Quaffade. Look at Matt Drudge. Look at what he did with Ted Cruz. That was despicable.
Look at Huckabee.
Yeah, Huckleberry.
You mentioned earlier.
Yeah. This sort of stuff is disgusting. And it goes to show that they're trying to walk a tightrope with this. They're trying to be politically correct, but not politically correct. They're all advocating this type of poisonous, venomous atmosphere that has descended upon the electorate and upon the nation as a whole, and it is destroying us. It is pitting us against each other and tearing us apart like we haven't seen in living memory. And I'm sorry, folks, but that is the way it is. These are just the facts.
Well, I'm not sorry about bringing the facts because that's our obligation.
No, but I'm sorry that we're in this state as a nation.
Yeah, we're sorry about that because we're embarrassed by it. We were raised better, and sadly, again, in some social circles, the parents are exhibiting these same things, or they're the ones that are actually espousing these attacks. Like many individuals are attacking Ted Cruz because of some of the things that his father said, which were taken completely out of context. His father talked about him being, king-like. Well, in a way, that was meant to be conveyed as a biblical characteristic. Not as being, Lord Jesus Christ, King of Kings, Lord of Lords, but more so in the way of King Solomon, who was the wisest king in the history of God's creation. Here on earth, that was a non-heavenly body. And he was talking about Ted Cruz having that wisdom, and having that wisdom of understanding the natural law tenets pertaining to the Constitution. But now, all of these individuals, these people that suffer from Tourette syndrome, the disillusioned utopian or Trumptarian version of Tourette's, are saying, oh, I'm a Christian. Ted Cruz is trying to bolster himself up as being holier than thou and, a king like, Jesus Christ, King of Kings, Lord of Lords, this and that. But I'm a Christian, and I don't agree with that. And Ted Cruz is, well, guess what? You are a fraud. You are a blasphemer. You know why? Because you are bearing false witness against your own brethren. Mm-hmm. Is what you are doing. And the Bible prohibits that. Mm-hmm. The Word of God prohibits that. God Himself prohibits that. So here you are bearing false witness against another Christian, but yet you want to tout yourself up as being a Christian. You're a fraud. An absolute fraud. Now, I'm not the most Christian-like individual. I am a Christian. I believe that I have been saved by the grace of God and by the love of Jesus Christ. But I'm never going to disparage another Christian in a way that is unwarranted.
Right. And in fact, that goes to this whole notion of ye who live in glass houses should not cast the first stone.
Should not cast stones.
Yeah.
Right.
And it all relates to that.
Girls before swine.
Right. And the idea is, again, this is where the code of civility comes in. It is not our place to take that kind of position. And therefore, the code of civility allows us to interact in ways that is promoting harmony. You see, we don't talk about promoting harmony in America anymore. We don't talk about working towards a greater good anymore, unless you look at the Fabian socialists who sit there and say that we have to become collectivists for that we have to push towards that. And of course, they're being disingenuous about that because they're trying to use the power of duress or using the iron fist of government to force it. And what that really does is kill philanthropic activities and engagements. And it's all by design because, again, it comes back to power and control. You will always find that at the heart of any battle in American polity. And it's been that way going back to the duel between Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr.
Yeah. Yep. And again, it's a very simple case of do as I say, not as I do. And even Trump brought that right to the forefront and said it right to everybody at one of his rallies. I think it was in New York, maybe it was in another state. He probably said it more than once. But when he made the statement, if I tell somebody to do something, they're going to do it. And then he says, well, we're going to build a wall, we're going to have Mexico pay for it. Okay, how? Explain how. See, he cannot explain how. He's only saying he's going to do these things, but never gives any specifics, never gives any technical reasoning or logic on how it's going to be accomplished. Mm-hmm. Instead, he creates this atmosphere of, again, what we see in the Roman Colosseum with the gladiators and the Roman spectators. He says all these things. They want blood. They want this. It's panem et circenses, the bread and circuses, food and entertainment. People want to be fat and happy. Instant gratification. And he is driving that like a multifaceted, pronged wedge into the heart and soul of the United States. Mm-hmm. In fact, I'm going to take this a step further. This is another tweet that I put out about a week ago. Mm. Donald Trump, yes, I'm speaking directly to you, Donald Trump. You have thrust the knife in the backs of liberty and freedom, and your supporters are doing everything they can, every chance they get, to twist that knife. And you are perpetuating it, you are condoning it, and you are allowing it to happen. And you say you care about America because America's been great to you? Wrong. That is the largest load of bovine excrement I have ever heard anybody ever say.
Well, let's give him a moment. Let's give him a moment for a benefit of the doubt. If he truly loves the nation as much as he says, he'll prove it by dropping out.
Absolutely. Drop out. And we're not saying that because we're afraid you might get the nomination. We're saying that because you are destroying everything that is holy and sanctimoniously verified of what our country is. You're destroying the fabric of our existence. And we're saying this, not out of fear of you getting the nomination. We're saying this because we know you cannot win. You do not have the wherewithal. You do not have the intelligence. You do not have the stamina.
He doesn't even have the desire. He doesn't even have the desire.
You have nothing in you to carry on this thing of running a campaign to the fullest extent and see it come to full fruition. By your own admission, you don't even want to do this. So drop out. Stop with the shenanigans. Stop with the charades. Even if you drop out now, you will still make enough money, because that was your whole intent to begin with, was to do this so that you can put more money in your pocket. Because you love money. You love money more than you even love yourself.
He loves money, he loves pecker, and he loves trannies. He loves money, he loves pecker, and he loves trannies.
And because you love money, you love peckers, and love trannies, you don't love yourself. And because you don't love yourself, you don't respect yourself. And because you don't respect yourself, you are incapable of having any modicum of respect for anybody else. You are a fraud, a shill. You need to drop out, and drop out now. Mm-hmm. God knows you won't come on our show because you won't be able to handle us here on the show. You won't even have enough cojones to send John Barron or John Miller onto the show. You won't send anybody to represent you on our show because you can't handle it. Because you know that if that happens, everything that you have thought you have accomplished now will completely be obliterated and undone.
And let's tie this back to education, because I think this is interesting. Trump has always talked about how he's had a great and wonderful education and how he has had the best teachers, he'll hire the best people and whatnot. Well, if he had the best education, how come he hasn't figured out how our delegate system works? How has he not learned Civics 101? That's a truly staggering problem. It's a frightening problem. And then
how can you have the best education when you never even read the United States Constitution, which is written to where a fifth grader could understand it,
mm-hmm.
but you never read it because you said you never saw any value in it. So you don't even value a fifth grade education enough to even read a document that is written to where fifth graders can understand.
Well, it's too bigly for him. It's too bigly for him because it's the bigliest of bigly laws. It's bigly huge, and he can't figure out bigly huge. If you dissect one of his sentences, how the hell is that an educated way of speaking?
It's again, drop out.
Yeah.
Do it now. Do it now. Because you're not going, even if you somehow miraculously secure, by some twisted, cruel sense of fate, the nomination for the Republican Party, you're not going to beat Hillary Clinton. And no, folks, I'm not defending Hillary Clinton. This is a simple fact. He cannot defeat Hillary Clinton, period. Anybody that says otherwise really has no grasp on what's going on. They are clouded. They have this watermelon Trump mixture of beer goggles on because they drank the Crawfade. and yes, the Quaffade is the Trump equivalent to Kool-Aid. It's a refreshing refreshment served at, intermission during Trump University classes.
Soon to be discontinued. Like every other Trump product. But it's troubling. It's troubling that the sense of anger, the sense of raw emotionalism has hit such a point in the United States today that we're not even focusing on things like the woeful state of education. Now, I know that the radical left has used that as a pillar for their arguments, as a pillar for their failed Fabian socialist policies. But there is a failing in our education. It's a push to standardize education, to make it all about standardized tests. And this goes back to the disastrous No Child Left Behind Act. But they're pushing it through with Common Core education, which is even worse. They are attempting to drive a wedge in between the parents and their children, going in and depriving the parents of their parental rights to shape and influence how their children develop. That is tyrannical. It's despotic. It is diametrically opposed to everything that we hold near and dear and value in this great representative republic of ours. And unless and until we stop and actually formulate a practicable and workable solution to this, or actually, we don't even have to do that because that's the Constitution, unless we are willing to be proactive in maintaining and safeguarding our fundamental and inalienable rights, we're going to continue to see our republic go down this death spiral, go down this path to destruction. And it's all rooted in this undeniable fact of the Constitution protects our rights, but it can only do so as long as we are proactively protecting it. It's a give and take. It is that contractual relationship because it is a social contract. It is the greatest social compact or contract ever devised by the hands of men, yet divinely inspired by providence above. But we have got to draw out a plan. And this is not going to be something that we can fix overnight. It's not going to be something that's going to have instant gratification. We have to be as willing to draw out a meticulous plan as the Fabian socialists were. A centuries-long plan, even, folks. We have to be willing to do that. And it starts with the Constitution. It starts with that fluent, fundamental, working knowledge and understanding of the Constitution and thereby our fundamental and inalienable rights. But unless and until we do so and start focusing on that and start seeing the value in it, hey, Donaldoff, that goes to you, there is value in it, then we're going to see these problems only accelerate and our country will fall apart.
Yeah, I'm going to get a little off base here, but I'm going to bring it right back to full circle with regarding on how to implement this plan or even structure the plan. First off, John Barron, a.k.a. Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpolini, you claim there was no value in the Constitution, therefore you didn't read it, but yet you want to claim that your First Amendment rights are violated at your rallies. It doesn't work like that. That's not how it works. You can't claim something and put it out there and say, my First Amendment rights to freedom of speech were violated. You can't claim that if you don't hold any value of where that right is enumerated.
It goes down to a message from the Cruz camp, which is a message we've also had. How can you make America great again if you don't know what made it great in the first place?
It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
So, and bringing this back again, it comes to the point of with how to implement this plan and the structure. You have to start with the Constitution because it's the spring law of the land, and everything has to be made in pursuance thereof, meaning it has to follow the Constitution. So this is step one of that plan. Step two, you start eliminating certain governmental agencies. Don't just defund them, make them non-existent and make them enforceably non-existent, meaning that you enforce their non-existence to begin with, like the Department of Education. It is not in adherence and accordance to the Constitution. Therefore, it is void ab initio. It has no legal authority to exist from the onset.
Mm-hmm.
So now you enforce that instead of saying, well, we're just going to defund it. No, get rid of it. Eliminate it altogether. Take it off the books. Oh, now you're destroying jobs. No, because what's going to happen is you're actually creating jobs in the future. Why? Because if the Department of Education is not involved, there goes things like Common Core.
Mm-hmm.
And then we bring back a sense of proper education back into the scope of things. And it's like I explained to my niece earlier today. Because she has this Common Core math stuff at school as a second grader. And some of the problems these math problems, like, well, you know, you have to estimate in order to get the sum or the equivalency of what the problem is, to get the answer to the problem. Okay, let's translate that into the working world where you have an employee that you hire that knows nothing but Common Core. Okay? Now, if that employee is working a job such as handling money, and the total of the product that somebody purchases comes to $19.73. Well, if they apply the Common Core, well, that's rounded down to $19, and they handed me a $20 bill, so I owe them $1 and change.
No, it's offensive because it goes against transgenders. You see, that's how Common Core will really go into it. And let's jump into that because there's something that comes right down to it. There's a story out of eagnews.org that says a Christian school is forced to drop the Crusaders mascot, and they're claiming that it's not due to political correctness, yet it came from political pressure. This was in Denver. Now, at the same time, in my home state of Texas, down in Austin, there was a Robert E. Lee High School. They're now voting to have the name changed due to all of the political correctness summer of 2015. And the top name that won for it, they want to change it to the Donald J. Trump High School. I kid you not.
Why?
Because they voted for it.
Because they voted for it. So, the democracy in action.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, democracy in action. So you're willing to infringe upon the rights or disparage the rights of others in order to protect the rights of a few. Way to go. Or the majority. Way to go. Yeah. Bravo.
Yeah.
Bravo.
So basically what you've described there is they're creating a tyranny of both the majority and the minority. That's how just out of touch this system is. Because it's not a representative republic. That's the danger of a direct democracy. It paralyzes a system and it throws any modicum of sanity to the wayside. But that's what the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media always do. It's what they want to do. They want to create chaos. They want to make it so destabilized that the people will come crawling to the government on bended knee and beg the government, even though it's the one that started all of this insanity, to solve a problem that they created. It's asinine. It's nuts. It's stupid.
How is it that they came up with the name to vote on? And Donald J.
It was
Trump
submitted by the public. They opened it up to the public to submit names and then voted on it.
I'll tell you why and how that came to be. Because of popularity. Because he's running as president. He's popular right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yada, yada, yada. Now, here's the thing, folks. We're talking about the sanctity and our sovereignty as a republic being in jeopardy here, and these people want to vote on something as if it's a name for a high school because the individual is popular.
Mm-hmm.
What would happen if we had, I don't know, this may be an extreme example, but it is legally possible with the consent of Congress, North Dakota and South Dakota merging together as one state. And then they don't want the name Dakota anymore because it's offensive to some American Indian tribe, and they want to change the name. And at the same time this is happening, let's say, I don't know, let's say all of a sudden Charles Manson becomes the most popular thing in the world. Are they going to change the name of that state to Manson?
Mansonville.
Mansonville.
Yeah. You see, this is just asinine. It's asinine.
You see the lunacy with that?
Yeah. Well. Look at what Obama did in Alaska. Look at what Obama did in Alaska, wanting to change the name of those mountains.
Yeah.
Which were named after Monroe, wasn't it? If I remember right.
It escapes me at the moment.
Yeah, it was one of the presidents. It was one of the presidents.
McKinley.
The McKinley. Yeah. And
wanted to change the name.
Yeah, because it's offensive to Indians or to the Inuits or to whatever. It's all about erasing the existing history. It's basically the same thing as the Cultural Revolution that existed in China. Remember, they went out to erase their own history. Why? Because these radical, frothing at the mouth left-wingers realize that they can't win in the ideological battle. They have to do it in underhanded, iron-fisted tactics that destroys. And then they brainwash the people into thinking that they have the best system ever. You even had, what was it, about this time last week, Bernard Sanders, nerd-faced boy me Sanders, saying that the lines that were experienced in the USSR for food and various other dictatorships for food are a good thing. It shows that there's order, that people are friendly about it. Amazing. Amazing.
And all of this because of instant gratification, brought about by revisionist history, the attempt to eliminate history, whether good or bad. See, folks, this is the problem when you try to remove history and replace it with something else that is more appealing and less offensive. You destroy all the good things that came out of that. You have to have the sense in the true natural law order of things. There is good versus evil. One cannot exist without the other. You have to have them both in order to have tranquility.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Now, if you want to remove something because it offends you, how about you remove yourself from my country? Because you do not have the right to not be offended. I have the First Amendment right to say whatever I want, to do whatever I want, an expression of freedom of speech. And if you don't like it, too bad. I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
Leave. Pack your belongings, buy a one-way ticket, and get the hell out of my country. Because you are destroying it. I don't want you here.
Well, they're purposefully trying to destroy it. That's the nefarious thing about it. Remember, the Fabians have that iconography of a wolf in sheep's clothing. Why? It's so that they can easily move about the upper echelons, the upper crust of society, thereby spreading their poison and destroying the nation from within. It all goes back to Marx. Marx always advocated the violent overthrow of the existing structure, that was the only way that his parasitic and viral ideology and political notion or philosophy could ever come into play. But it's based on a fatal flaw. First of all, he says that history is linearly progressive. It progresses
or progresses out in a line. But that's not true. History, like life, is cyclical. There are repetitive patterns that are discernible that show up throughout everyone's life. And we're seeing a repeat in history now. We're seeing a push for an internal quest for our identity, much like we were in the 1890s, much like we were in the 1970s. You see, it just spins that way. And we happen to be on that part of the historical pattern. But if you go by the Marxist dialectic and the Marxian approach to history, they wouldn't recognize that, because it's supposed to linearly progress towards the beautiful utopia of communism, where government will wither on the vine and die. No, human nature is the other aspect that he didn't understand.
And here's the thing with arts. As you mentioned, whatever philosophical or ideology was in place that was controlling things, he wanted it to be toppled and overthrown. Even if it was one that he agreed with. Because that was the only way that he could justify making those statements. Even if it was something that he agreed with, he still wanted it overthrown, which means he was an agent provocateur of anarchy and chaos. He never wanted any sustainable system of governance at all. He wanted several different orders of government to come in and only be in for a certain amount of time, and then, you outlive your existence, move on to the next one. And it's over and over and over again until all forms of ideology were completed and exacerbated and extorted, and then total anarchy and chaos, which, again, completely disproves his whole point about things being linear, because after totalitarianism and chaos and anarchy, you start right back over again at the circle. And you start the whole process all over again. It's like life. It's cyclical.
Yep. It's like weather. And you see, you can tie that into another farce and failing in education, the hoax of man-made global warming.
Yes. Well, climate change.
Oh, yes. Climate disruption,
climate
even.
Change. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, as another mutual friend of ours from years past has always stated, you want to get rid of global warming and climate change, obliterate the sun.
Yeah. Nuke the whales.
You know?
Nuke the whales.
Yeah. Nuke the whales. Of course, we all know that global flattening is real, and
scientifically proven.
Nature's not too happy about all the exploding penguins.
You see,
all you cartographers out there, beware.
Yeah. You see, folks, we lampoon this stuff because if you don't start to laugh at it and you don't use satire, you're letting one of the greatest arrows in your quiver go to waste. Satire really does take the teeth out of it. It takes the power out of it. And there was a comedian today who just tore into some of these hecklers at an event that he was going to because there was going to be a conservative commentator there. And he just said, "What's wrong with you? Oh, your parents raised you to think that your opinion mattered that much? It doesn't." And that's what it comes down to, folks. These people think that they are so important that they have to have their own safety zone to protect them from freedom of speech, that they have to be shielded from our ability to think for ourselves, our ability to speak for ourselves, when in fact they should be vigorously engaged in discussing their differences of opinions to learn more, not only about their own ideology, but about the rest of the world. You know, the term liberal arts education used to be about developing a well-rounded individual that was capable to handle almost any task that he or she would encounter in their lives. But it doesn't mean that anymore. You see that from them changing things from, say, like the humanities and turning it into social sciences. It's disingenuous, and it goes right back to that dangerous, twisted game of semantics that the radical extreme fringes of the left always engage in. It's weasel words. That's what they engage in. That's what they believe in. That's what they're pushing. And it's all to the detriment to our society and to the stability of a society, but most importantly of all, to the continuing future viability of our country.
Well, here's another one of those weasel words or buzz phrases. Social justice.
Mm-hmm.
Now, folks, let me give you an example of social justice. It's not what these unicorn, bareback riding, Kudafarian, rainbow farting jet fighters think it is, because it doesn't fit their narrative for this nation. But here is a sense of social justice. The demonizing, the destruction, the deportation of the Jews in Nazi Germany. That is social justice, because the way that it was implemented, Hitler wanted to utilize that as revenge or justice for a dispersion that was cast upon his homeland, his fatherland, Germany, Deutschland.
Mm-hmm.
So socially, he came out and called for this, implemented it, in order to obtain that sense of justice. See, this is the problem. When people want to take words like social and justice and put them together to give them some form of a meaning,
Mm-hmm.
they completely take away from the context of those words individually. Another example, Bernie Sanders, Mr. Democratic Socialist himself. That would be no different than saying, oh, well, I'm a legal rapist. I'm a legal murderer. It's the same thing. It's the same context.
Yeah, it's like saying that you can legally lynch someone.
Yes.
Now, I've got some breaking news here, Jeremy, and it goes towards education. Big one. And even though I don't like Fox News right now, this is something that popped up on a social media feed. New York judge decides Trump University case is going to trial. This is big, folks. New York County Supreme Court judge. Now, to just draw this up for you, the Supreme Court in New York is not like it is anywhere else. That's your trial court. That's your basic court. Shows you just how weird New York is. But New York County Supreme Court Judge Cynthia Kern made a decision at a hearing Tuesday. It remains unclear whether the case will be weighed at a jury trial, which is what Trump's team is seeking. Trump attorney Jeffrey Goldman said it's possible the trial could be held this fall, and Trump could testify. Basically,
well, that's very interesting, Randy, because as we mentioned on
Solo Flight,
a previous episode,
yeah,
part of the reason why Trump is a candidate, he has no intention of winning, but a little sidecar for him to ride in that he places his comb over into is, if you are a presidential candidate, sovereign immunity for prosecution. But it could go to trial this fall.
Mm-hmm.
The election's in November, so I see his attorney is actually foreshadowing something here. If it's going to trial this fall, that means, guess what, folks? All you Trump supporters out there, is that he's going to have to drop out of the campaign, especially if he's going to testify, because he would not be able to engage in that hearing if he's a presidential candidate.
Yep.
How interesting is that?
Very. And it just goes to show that a fraud is being taken down by allegations of fraud. We warned all of you about this for 10 months now.
Ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Trump is not looking out for the best interests of the United States. And this all ties back into education. Why? Because he was giving this farce of a program in which he was claiming to teach people the skills that made him a great entrepreneur, that made him a great success in the real estate market world. Of course, the problem is it was all a lie. It was all based on lies. None of it was true. He duped people just to get them to depart from their hard-earned dollars. And that's exactly what he's done all throughout this 2016 presidential election cycle as well. It's all coming to fruition. It's all bubbling to the surface, just as the truth always does.
And again, this points to the fact that people claim that Trump is self-funding his campaign.
Yeah.
If that's the case, then why does he have donation websites up for people to donate money to him?
Yeah.
Why bother donating money or collecting donations if you don't need people's money? He said it himself, I don't need anybody's money, so why set up the donations for the websites?
Mm-hmm.
It's because he's not utilizing that money. Oh, wait, yes, he is. Because he's borrowed money from his own companies to fund his campaign, and guess what? He's using your donated dollars to pay that money back so that he can implement some kind of tax credit and a write-off.
Mm-hmm.
That's called money laundering.
Yes, it is.
That violates the RICO statutes. Oops.
Alas.
I got a feeling, folks, that Trump University is going to be the least of his worries regarding that.
Oh, yeah. Of course it is. But you know what the response will be. Yeah,
but Trump. Yeah, but how? Yeah, but why? Yabba dabba do, it's a gay old time.
Yeah. And you see, that's part of the thing here. The ones who are wanting to control the way education works in this nation, those elitists, those current political powers that be, they never expose their own to it. They never expose their own to the same kind of madness that they expect to thrust upon us. They always find ways to exempt themselves and their kin from it. It's disgusting, but it shows that they have this desire, this inexorable, unquenchable thirst to push themselves away from, to divorce themselves from the true popular sovereigns in this nation. And part of the reason that they're doing this is because they don't want the ultimate wielders of sovereignty, we the people, to be armed with the knowledge to know how to tell them no, to know how to force them into the proper constraints imposed upon them by the clear and concise language contained within the four corners of our shared United States Constitution. And the reason they know this is why they have targeted that. It is why they are pushing to deprive us of that. And that is intellectually disingenuous in its own right.
Well, it's insulting to the intelligence of everyone who has actually held any kind of principles rooted in natural law.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that insult is twofold. Why? Because the Trump campaign and all of those individuals that want to perpetrate this insult and infringement upon the individual happens, and then when the individual themselves abandon their principles, they're insulting their own intelligence. They're insulting themselves. All the while, they're pointing the finger at everybody else that they disagree with, but failing to accept the fact that they have three fingers pointing back at themselves.
Mm-hmm. It's willful blindness. That's what they're engaged in. They are blinding themselves to the truth because the truth hurts. But folks, the truth also sets you free. That is why it is so important to seek the truth. And that is why it's important that you empower yourself to look into the knowledge and information that's being put out there. It's just a sad fact of life now that the cancerous doctrine of political correctness, that indoctrination, that all of these wicked developments are out there threatening to destroy all that we hold near and dear. But we have to recall that this is by design. This is what the Fabian socialists have desired to do to this nation for well over a century. They have worked tirelessly, relentlessly, and incessantly towards this goal, and they think they see a light at the end of the tunnel. They think that they are within reaching distance of achieving their goals. And they are, unless we stand up in proactive fashion and say, to hell with you, you are not going to redefine my country, you are not going to indoctrinate the up-and-coming generations or those generations which have yet to be born, because we're not going to let you. If it's a yeah but Trump or a yeah but Hillary or a yeah but Bernie's moment, we trump that with, yeah, the Constitution says no.
Yeah, but no.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, no.
Exactly.
That's the response. Okay, no. My goodness, that is such a powerful word.
Isn't it?
It's such a powerful word. No.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you don't vote for Trump, it's a vote for Hillary. Yeah, no. You might as well vote for Bernie Sanders.
No. Yep.
That's how that works. And again, until we start utilizing that, I don't give a damn if it offends people. I don't care. You do not have the right to not be offended. If you don't want to be offended,
close your
and
ears.
you think you have the right to not be offended, find another place to live.
Yeah.
Find another place to live. That's infringing on my rights. You can't tell me that I have to move.
They're not telling you have to. It's just expect to suffer the consequences of not doing so.
Sure.
And that is being lampooned and ridiculed by those of us who actually do care about the future of this country, by those of us that are actually making a principled stance. Because if you think that this type of anger that everyone's been talking about all throughout the election cycle, all with respect to education, like the Black Lives Matter groups, they say they're angry. Like all of these groups that want to tear down our institutions and our traditions and to force transgender people into public restrooms with little girls, they say they're angry because they're being stepped on. No, the real anger is by those of us who are watching our country implode because of this mass stupidity. And there will be a consequence to pay for prodding us and pushing us in this direction.
And I guarantee you, our anger outweighs yours tenfold.
Because ours is righteous indignation.
You think we sound angry? This is nothing. These statements that we make, these are happy statements.
They're gay statements.
They're made in a happy tone. Trust us, folks. When we start making statements that are backed up and cemented in concrete with our righteous indignation and our righteous anger, trust us, it's going to be a whole new way of looking at things. Because when it comes to that point, they're only going to be made one time. Those statements will be made once, and that's it. There is no repeating of those statements. It's made one time, and then swift action follows.
And that's the way this country has to be. That's the way this country was founded. That was what led us to achieve such lofty heights in our relatively brief yet illustrious history. And it shows that what really makes America great, besides the Constitution, is that unconquerable spirit of the American people. That ability to stand up against all odds and all adversity and to To hell with those that are going to oppress us. To hell with those that are going to attack us. To hell with those that tell us no. We're going to tell them no, and we're going to prove them wrong, and we're going to do what we have set ourselves to do. So right now, what we need to do as a nation is make it our goal to save the nation. And that means from enemies both foreign and domestic. And if we make that pledge right here and right now and become the new resistance, there is nothing that will stop this nation from reaching prosperity again. But it comes from within ourselves. It comes from within our own souls. We must open the windows to our souls and show the true light of liberty, which is the bedrock principle of our people and our nation as embodied in the clear and concise language within the four corners of our shared United States Constitution. And that is the message that we bring to you each and every time. We do this to empower you.
And folks, right here, right now, yet again, I am making that pledge. I am making that pledge to you. I am making that pledge to our posterity. I am making that pledge to Randy. And above all else, I'm making that pledge to myself. Because if we do not even make that pledge to our own selves, then pledging that and
is an act of futility.
For anybody else, it is all for naught.
Mm-hmm.
Pledge it for yourselves first, because without you, you will not be able to uphold that pledge for anybody else.
Exactly so. And with that said, it is time for us to begin our descent. I'm going to go ahead and send the flight attendant back with, lecture books so that we can all become properly educated, as well as an extra shot of alcohol. And we will begin the descent. And as always, I'm Randy Wright, your captain, and I've been joined by my first officer, Jeremy Grapington. Folks, we really do thank you for joining us each and every time. We couldn't do this without you. In fact, we do this for you. I also invite you to leave any questions, comments, or concerns you have either here at our YouTube page or on our Facebook page or our Google Plus page. And on top of all of this, I invite you to follow us at Twitter with the Twitter handle at Radio Aviation EX. One more time, folks, that's at Radio Aviation EX. There you will find our departure board, which has my personal Twitter account, Jeremy's personal Twitter account, our Blogspot account, which is also educational, keeping along with the theme here. And you can also educate yourself as to the products and goodies that we have on our Cafe Press account, which is located there as well. That includes such educational aids as shot glasses with our logos on them, also attire so that you can go to school in style, and clocks so that you can keep track of your time in educating yourself. It's all amazing. You see, it all comes back together. Thank you, folks. We'll see you next time. Do take care.